Please raise your hands if you Javed Sumro.
My question is for Tom. You said that the creation of Pakistan was a kind of enterprise by the colonial British government. This is a kind of a perception. There is already, generating in Pakistan and outside. Do we have any kind of evidence of the sources who can confirm that theory?
Well, there are a number of indications of the way in which the British were thinking, the way the wind was blowing. One point I made earlier was that Jinnah was originally a United Indiaman, along with most members of the Muslim League. The change came shortly after the beginning of the Second World War. Jinnah was wined and dined and feted and travelled to London many, many times during the war, where he met the King. He met regularly with Winston Churchill, who was, of course, he was an empire loyalist. He didn't want India to have freedom anyway, but he had already composed, I suspect, his Iron Curtain speech, because during the war, the Americans and British, the Western Allies, were amazed at the power of the Red Army, who in reality were the ones who defeated Germany. Although Americans think that they won the war, it was actually the Red Army that smashed the power of German militarism. And they produced some fantastic weapons. They had turned a backward agricultural based country into an industrial giant in a matter of a couple of generations without the aid of capitalists, bankers or landlords. They were all gone. The people had done these things, the common people had produced their own engineers and their own scientists, and they had developed a nation and turned it and produced a huge industry. Certainly it was a totalitarian state, not ideal in my own view, but nevertheless it proved the concept. And it proved that concept of the superfluous nature of inherited wealth and capitalism and landlordism. The people can do it without that, and that was what really worried the British ruling elite. So the plan, so they had the motive not to allow India, which was led by people like Pandit Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi, and others like Surawadi in Bengal, and Sumro in Sindh. There were many, and Bose, who started the Indian National Army. These were all left-leaning people. They believed, not necessarily, they took account of Marxism, I have no doubt, but they were left-leaning and believed that some kind of socialism would be best for the Indian people as a whole. That didn't suit the interests of the British. The riots in Calcutta in 1946 are important in the context of this debate, because in 1946, as probably most of you know, there were some dreadful communal riots in Calcutta, and the British Army was stood down. They made no effort whatsoever to quell these riots. They went on for several days, in which thousands of people, both Hindu and Muslim, were killed. There were retaliatory riots by the Hindus against Muslims and vice versa. And the British Army was stood down. Why on earth would that happen? Surely the duty of the army at that time was to stop it, to put troops onto the streets, to part these mobs. Because the reason being is they stood them down because they wanted to try to make the case for the two-nation theory, the idea that Muslims and Hindus couldn't live together. Although during the Mughal Empire, Muslims had ruled India, and they lived reasonably, had reasonable coexistence. There was occasional communal violence, but generally speaking, they lived together and they worked together. They shared a common culture. The Sufi religion of India was amenable to common culture. And that's another reason why the case doesn't have to be made too strongly that Jinnah was courted and patronised by the British establishment and ultimately changed his attitude towards the partition idea. He became a two-nation theorist belatedly when independence was certainly guaranteed. That basically.
I can completely understand the psyche and the efforts behind going on, but I was just wondering if there is any document or any paper somewhere in the kind of archive or somewhere which can indicate clearly that there was something.
Well, it's a bit like the mafia. They don't write documents. They don't need evidence.
There is a document on this, and these are available with the British Library, and that which clearly shows there's not one document. And Tom, you should go through these documents as well. I've got a book as well, which is called In the Shadow of Great Game, the Untold Story of India's Partition. Because those documents, which were confidential at that point in time, they have been now declassified, and there is not one. There are hundreds of documents. Because every week the Viceroy used to say summary, and these old strategies to make and support Pakistan, and these documents are significant amount, and they are present, and they should be referred to when getting and reaching to this conclusion. And I firmly believe, there is no doubt about it, that it was British design to create Pakistan, a client state, which should serve their purposes, and it did. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other question, please? Okay, Dr. Latina Sheikh.
Well, kind of. Mujib, as a youngster. So.
Difficult time for you, Mujib.
Yes, no, it's a really very sort of, we are confused. When we go to Sindh, every time we face the challenge that the young generation, especially Sindhi young generation who is living in urban areas, Hyderabad, Karachi, has no interest as such, we feel that, into the human rights issues or actually the right to do, it's nothing to do with just being a nationalist, but it's generally to have an ability or an interest to criticize wrong things going on. And such a social issue, I mean, such how emotional and sentimental the issue of minorities is, or minority girls is. I mean, it touches us absolutely every. Other Christians' speech just throw me out the whole day today. So how can a young generation student community can ignore those things and cannot mobilize themselves to really resist, bang on the government and do the protest? Where is this whole activism gone of lately? Right. I mean, I would like to understand what's going on, or is anything we can do, is anything can be done locally? How can this should be addressed issue? Thank you.
Of course. Like I mentioned, the student movements that started in the 70s and the 80s, they were extremely significant in promoting the JSN movement and movements of the sort. However, in 1984, again, they were banned. And for the next 40 years or so, even up to today, they're still banned. So when it comes to mobilizing them, there's this quote they have in Urdu, "Gulab ke phool gutter mein nahi khilte." So when you make education such a confusing task, where neither the educator nor the person seeking the education they're in a constant state of perplexion and confusion. You throw this homework at them and this, that and the other. You show them history which they've been told from their homes is incorrect. However, they have to pass with XYZ grades and this and that and the other. So making it it's turned into a political issue as it is, because they've banned the mobilization of students, student unions, and groups that may incite negative comments against the national narrative. At the same time, it comes back to this, where we've been starved from not just the education, like Liaquat Ali Khan banning Sindhi education in Karachi, in the capital of Sindh, to a point where after this many years, after 60 years, when we go to Lahore, no one says, "Okay, why is someone speaking in Punjabi?" But we're in the capital of Sindh. When someone speaks in Sindhi, someone looks at them like this. And I'm sure you've experienced this as well. So it's just starving, not just the intellect, but also making it so confusing both politically, in the judiciary, and also you're scared for your lives when you're in these universities. We've seen multiple instances of students being taken away. We're just there to complete our education. We're trying to make a better life out of what we've been given, however little that may be. So the point is not to starve. The student society is the first repelling these laws that banned the student unions, and secondly, which is why I actually migrated from Pakistan and transferred my undergraduate degree to Coventry over here, is because in Pakistan we're not seen as academia. Students are not part of the academia, it's either the faculty or the administration, and they've made the whole process of attaining education so confusing, where you're just trying to find some sort of notes, some sort of magic formula that will make you pass, starving your analytical skills, where you are just regurgitating what your professor told you yesterday to a point where you just have to pass the test. It's very Kafkaesque. So it starts with policy, and as far as social change is concerned, at least in the urban areas, again, it's again just policy and letting the heroes of Sindh, letting the history of Sindh, letting the poetry of Sindh reach the people who are studying in Sindh, and not just Federal Education Board dictating what we need to be taught in order for us to succeed.
Thank you very much.